Welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast, brought to you by TournamentPokerEdge.com, the only podcast dedicated exclusively to poker tournament strategy. Now here's your host, Clayton Fletcher.
Hello once again, everybody, and welcome to the Tournament Poker Edge podcast. I'm your host, Clayton Fletcher, here in fabulous Las Vegas, where I have to be honest, things are not going well. I have played in 9 of these Venetian tournaments, and I have made exactly 1 dinner break. I'm not going to share my bad beat stories, but I will tell you that there have been a number of times when I got it in quite good and still managed to hit the showers very soon thereafter, as is the case in every poker player's life. So if you're a tournament grinder like I've been for a long time, this story is probably not making you shed a tear for me, because it's all too familiar to you as well. But I always like to share my successes with you guys, and this week I need to share that I have not had any success of late. That said, it is nice to be back on the felt playing live poker, although it's strange now that they made us put our masks back on. I was in Vegas on the day when they announced that the masks need to go back on. I think that was actually the same day as I recorded the last podcast. So it was fun playing live poker without a mask for a week, and it's less fun now playing poker with a mask. And the casinos are being really strict. Like, if your mask is on, but it's not covering your nose, or you take a few seconds too long drinking your water, they're right on you, like saying you have to cover your face. So I guess it's all in the name of public health or something, but that's weird. Anyway, that's what's going on. I just have a few more days here, and then I will have to tuck my tail between my legs and make my sad departure, hoping that, as my one superstitious friend told me, I'm getting all my bad luck out of the way now so that I will have good luck in October. I wish thoughts like that would help me sleep better at night, but the fact is I don't believe in luck. All right, I wanted to share a review that we got recently. This one comes from a reviewer called DCD 1977. The headline for his review, it's a 5-star review. It says, "Fantastic for poker tournament strategy. Listening to this podcast has really helped my poker tournament play. Every time I'm in a hand, I think to myself, what would Clayton do?" So naturally, I've been bubbling a lot. But absolutely awesome content. Keep up the good work, Clayton and crew. And that is the kind of deprecating humor that I really need right now, as I'm just walking to Venetian every day and then losing my shirt. So I'm not going to be the only one talking today. You'll be glad to know we have a first-time guest, but a long-time member of Tournament Poker Edge. He is a successful online player. He tells me that he's had the best summer of his entire career, and one of the highlights included being at the final table of the Crazy Eights online WSOP bracelet event that was won by our friend Carlos Welch. So please welcome, you can find him on Twitter at Joe Beagles. First time guest, Joe Beagles. Joe, can I just say, I don't think that is your real name. Is it okay if I start off that way?
Hi, Clayton. Yes, it is okay. My name is actually Joey, but I go by Joe Beagles pretty much everywhere online. So,
okay. Yeah. And you're pretty active on Twitter. Yeah, no problem. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. You're pretty active on Twitter. What do you feel about Twitter and poker Twitter and being a part of poker Twitter as a whole?
I am active on Twitter. My handle, gonna insert it here for a quick little punchline here, is at Joe_Beagles. But yeah, I am active on Twitter, and I do love poker Twitter. I'm more of the replier, shall you say. I like to look through the threads and reply to people. I will tweet out my own stuff, usually updates on tournaments that I'm playing or different random thoughts that I have. But I've made a big effort to be very neutral on Twitter. So I try not to get involved with any of the drama, and I enjoy just watching it all unfold. So.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of schadenfreude that comes with just enjoying other people's drama on Twitter for sure. So yeah, it's Joe_Beagles. Now, Joe, when did you first join TPE, and what has your experience with us been like?
My TPE experience is a little unique, I think. So I joined TPE back in 2016. At the time, I was living in Argentina, and I was really looking for a way to improve that was affordable. So I've played poker for over 15 years, but I played recreationally for a very long time with my friends for a long time. I would occasionally go to the casino, and I'd say in the long run, maybe break even by the time I was, 5 or 6 years in. This is way pre Black Friday, but I ended up not really taking it very seriously until I moved to Argentina, and that was around mid-2016. And when I moved there, I was looking for a training site that was affordable for me. At the time, I was very active on Twitch in terms of watching Twitch streamers. One of the first streamers I ever watched was Dylan Horton. Shout out to Dylan, the Poker Devil, who now I believe he doesn't stream that much anymore. But I used to watch a lot of Twitch streams, and I believe I first heard of TPE from a Twitch stream. It might have been Killing Birds. I don't know if he was streaming at that point. But yeah, so I first heard of Tournament Poker Edge from a Twitch stream, and I signed up, and from that point on, I just kind of took off. It was where I was introduced to a bunch of people. Andrew Brokus, obviously, Mark Aliotto, Big Dog Pocket Fives, Colin Mosh, and all of them. I started watching all the videos. I was a huge fan. I thought to myself, hey, for $25 a month, I'm not paying per video. I might as well watch as many videos as I can. And so I started doing that and listening to the Thinking Poker podcast. I started listening to the old TPE podcast, and really working on my game at that point in my life. That year, I actually won a seat on PokerStars to the Latin American Poker Tour in Uruguay. And so that was kind of a really big deal for me, because it would be the first big live tournament that I played, and I never really had much success in online poker before that point. So that was really, really cool for me.
So what was the buy-in for that EPT event?
So that it was a Latin American Poker Tour event. So It was an LAPT event. It was in Uruguay, in Punta del Este, at the Enjoy Conrad Hotel and Casino, which is a very, very nice casino down there on the coast in Uruguay. And at the time, I was living in Argentina because the girl I was dating, who is not my wife, she was living in Argentina. And as it turns out, her family had an apartment down the street from this casino, and I happened to win an entry into this main event at the LAPT. It was a $1,600 tournament.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was from a $10 Hyper Turbo late night Saturday on PokerStars.
Yeah, those are the stories. I have a few like that. Back in the day, I used to play on Cake Poker, and I won my seat the first time I ever went to the Aussie Millions. I won this like $17,000 package for like $30. We were all trying to be moneymaker in our own special way. But yeah, those were good times. You don't really get that anymore, at least here in the States. You live in the U.S. now?
I do, yeah. I live in California, in Southern California. And you talk about Cake Poker a lot on the podcast. I did play on Cake Poker for quite some time. I may be the only one out there listening right now who did, but I remember that site very, very well.
You've been playing, but you've been playing for 15 years, which is 105 in dog years. So you've been around a while.
Poker years.
No, dog years, because of the Beagle thing. Yeah, so what is that? Because you and Derek both have this thing about Beagles. So what's up with the Beagle? Like, do you own Beagles? Do you care about Beagles? Or do you just choose the word?
So for me personally, it stems from a huge love and admiration towards them, and it's one that I've had since I was a child. I did have a Beagle when I was younger. Spoiler alert, I don't have a Beagle now. I've been called a fraud, but that's okay. I do love Beagles very, very, very much, and they've been a huge passion of mine since I was a teenager. So that's why I have kind of crafted my screen names off of them. I know Derek has his own reasons for his, 24-hour Beagle stream and that sort of thing, and of course I always try and show up and support him.
Yeah. Well, I never had a dog. I've never owned a dog. I have a cat now, but I understand that people really like the love between a pet and a human is very special. And like if you had a Beagle when you were a kid, I think you can still use the name now because you qualify. You know what I mean? Like you're in.
I agree.
Yeah, retroactively.
Agree.
Yeah.
For life, I'm allowed to.
Yeah, but it seems like that particular breed of dog seems to attract people that become really passionate about that exact breed. Like I feel like there are dog lovers and there are Beagle lovers, and it's a separate category almost.
That's a really good point, and I think that's really accurate. I don't know why that is, but everyone I've met who has a fondness for Beagles, that fondness is quite strong.
Yeah, and it's for that particular breed of dog. And not to say you wouldn't like some other kind of dog, but I think that Beagles have a way of getting, I don't know, somehow into our hearts or something. The only Beagle I'm really familiar with is Snoopy, and he's pretty awesome.
Snoopy is awesome.
Yeah.
The thing about Beagles, I think, is that they've been around forever. They're the hunting dog. They're kind of like you think of the rural old school companion. So I think that's what drives a lot of people's interest in them.
Yeah, kind of like a throwback dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Well, before this becomes a dog lovers podcast, let's get into poker a little bit. So you were grinding these $10 late night satellites to try to win spots on the PokerStars LAPT, and so what happens from there?
So from there, I moved back to the States in 2017, and I started playing live a lot, and I had a pretty decent summer in 2017. At the time, it was my best summer, which is no longer true, but I did have a good summer in 2017. I won a side event at the Legends of Poker WPT stop in Los Angeles.
The bicycle casino. I've played that event myself. Good times.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good times. So I had a pretty big summer for me in 2017, and then lots of other kind of life events took me away from the felt, both the real felt and the virtual felt, for about a year or two, including getting my bachelor's degree and other kind of big events that caused me to have to take some time off and away from the tables.
Now hold on, Joey, because I've heard of people quitting college to pursue poker, but never somebody quitting poker to pursue college. What's up with that?
That's correct. You heard me right. I did stop playing a lot to continue to focus on my bachelor's degree, and I am actually currently getting a master's degree right now, as well as playing full time. But yeah, it's a thing. Not many people do it. People go the other direction, but it's a thing.
So what are you studying now?
Now I'm getting my master's degree in finance. I figured it was about as close to poker as I could get.
Yeah, sure. It's all about risk management and things of that nature. There are so many parallels. I find a lot of financial people do pretty well in poker because they're familiar with some of the concepts that are foreign to people from other backgrounds. So they
exactly.
do have a lot of overlap. Yeah.
A lot of the concepts are almost exactly the same. I mean, in day one they're trying to teach me expected value, and I'm, like, okay,
yeah,
let's move on.
Yeah, I could have tested out of this part. Yeah.
But yeah. So anyway, I came back to poker around mid 2019 or so, I'd say, and I played sporadically in the time from 2017 to 2019, but I really came back around mid 2019, and I did decently well, enough that at that point I had graduated college and I was working a full-time job, and around March of 2020, which is right when about COVID hit, I was actually let go from my job, and it ended up being like the best thing that possibly could have happened to me, because I kind of had flirted with this idea of playing poker full time and streaming full time. I had started streaming a little bit on Twitch, trying to get out there, trying to improve my game a lot, and I was having a good year. And so once I was let go from my job in early 2020, it was kind of like the push that I needed to really say, okay, I'm gonna go hard full time into poker. I'm gonna spend my time studying. I'm gonna spend my time streaming. I'm gonna make this what I want to do with my life. And it's been a journey since then. It really has, man. I streamed full time for a month or two, but after a while, I was on the ACR Stormers too, for a brief period of time. But after I stopped streaming so much, Jason Snodson-Lost, he messaged me and he said, you gotta stream. but yeah, so I stopped streaming and I focused really on playing full time and studying and that sort of thing. And I guess you could call it an issue. I didn't think it was an issue at the time, but what happened was my first month or month and a half of playing full time was great. And I just thought I was the best. And I was like, yes, I've done it. I'm a successful, full-time poker player. And so what followed was 7 to 8 months of not so great.
Not so great, right, yeah. Yeah, we can't let the results fool us, can we? Like, we're never as good as we think, nor are we as bad as we think, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the hardest parts about playing this game full time is determining, am I running good? Am I playing well? What's going on? Am I losing in high equity spots? Am I running bad? Am I higher buy-in tournaments? What's the deal? And I think half the battle is just figuring out, like, what's going on? Where are my leaks and what are my actual leaks? But yeah, so the last half of 2020 was very tough for me poker-wise, and I was working with my coach, Andrew Brokus was my coach during 2020. I was working with him, and I remember at one point I looked at my Poker Tracker 4 graph, and there was something like 125,000 or 150,000 hands that I had in the whole year, and my win rate was like 0.00007 big blinds per 100. Basically break even.
You're positive. You're a profitable player. Can you make a living on 0.0000007?
And I know win rate and red line, all that stuff. It doesn't say everything all unadjusted. It doesn't tell the whole story.
Right.
Over that sample size, it's a little worrisome. And I realized at that point on my own that I was doing really well in the earlier stages of tournaments and not doing so well in the later stages of tournaments. And one thing that was kind of like an aha moment for me, poker-wise, was at the end of 2020 when I started to realize that I'm just getting outplayed at the final 4 tables, the final 3 tables, the final 2 tables. I found myself getting there constantly, but I was just constantly getting outplayed. And I was finding myself in these awkward spots that I didn't have to be in. And so I really focused on that part of my tournament game.
So what was going on generally? Were they running over you? Were you knitting it up too much? Were you putting yourself in vulnerable spots too often? What was going on there?
It was a combination of two things. The first is I was definitely knitting it up too much. It's a very hard human nature type habit to avoid when we're playing for sums of money that are large for us.
Yeah.
But the second and the bigger issue that I've fixed was mentally is I was struggling being deep in a tournament, dealing with the pressure. I mean, whether you're playing for $500 or $500,000, if it's a lot of money to you, it's a lot of money to you, and it's going to be a lot of pressure on you. And so I was having trouble dealing with the pressure, and I wasn't responding well. So I would lose a pot and just dust it all off. punt it all away, or I would, take a bad beat and kind of lose my mind. Oh, this always happens to me at the final 2 tables. Oh, aces lose to kings at the final 3 tables. How come I can never, this and this and this? And so once I started addressing that, and I did so through a couple of different tactics, including meditation. Once I started addressing that part of my game, I noticed myself really improving, and of course studying more theory, because as you get deeper into these higher tournaments, you're going to be encountering better players, and we want to be playing more theory-based in that regard. So studying more theory along with helping fix those mental leaks is really what helped me with that.
So you struggled with tilt a bit, especially late in events where the pressure was already on. If something bad happened, you had trouble keeping your composure, and you tried to address that problem through meditation and other sources. You were working with Andrew, our good friend Andrew Brokus at that time as your coach. What kind of advice did he give you about handling that particular problem?
When I first had my first session with Andrew, he did give me some good advice about that. Basically it has to stop. I mean, besides the fact that it has to stop, as he talked about, treating the game professionally. What we do as professionals is we are professional poker players, and we need to take it seriously, much like someone who works at a bank takes their job seriously. It's what we do is important, and we need to treat it with the respect that it deserves. And when you tilt like that, when you let yourself get thrown off your game, or for whatever reason allow yourself to be emotionally connected to the way you play, it never ends up well. And so we need to learn to disconnect ourselves from the money that we're playing for, disconnect our emotions from the results of the table. And so that's been the struggle for me, and that's kind of something that he echoed to me as well. And that's something I've been working on a lot. I remember about 2 months ago, I took a bad beat. I was at a table with a friend of mine. I took a bad beat, and he sent me a message and said, oh, that sucked or something. And I told him, I said, I'm trying this new thing where I take a deep breath. I tell myself that sucked, and I move on. And doing that has absolutely helped me a lot, is take a deep breath, tell yourself that sucked, and we move on. So.
Yeah, that's basically what I do. I never try to not feel something. I think human nature is that you have emotions, like if something hurts, it hurts. And I'll admit to myself that it hurts. But then I also remind myself that, as you say, we professionals need to be able to take that pain and then move forward. And I mean, everybody tilts. I don't care who you are. There is a moment in your life when you were not emotionally prepared for the horrible news the cards were about to deliver, and it messed up your game. So I'm not going to pretend that I can stay on my A game immediately after some horrible stroke of luck strikes. But I will say that I think that just feeling it and admitting that I feel it, I'm like, wow, that really sucks. I'm very disappointed right now that I just went from 3 times an average stack to half an average stack. But I'm still in the tournament, and now my job is to focus on what comes next, not on what already happened. And just kind of centering myself with thoughts like that. I never try to pretend that I'm a robot and that I don't have feelings, but I do understand the importance of experiencing that emotion and then trying to put it behind me as soon as I can, because now we're dealing another hand and I can't be stuck on that last one, or those mistakes are just going to compound. Or maybe the first one wasn't even a mistake, but what happens afterwards could definitely be a serious mistake if I'm not careful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And one thing I've started thinking about, I overheard from a study session from several months ago. At one point, there was a hand, and the hero had 15 big blinds, and the guy who was giving a study session said, 15 big blinds is my favorite stack to play. And I started thinking about that, and one thing I've done with that is I've really tried to internalize that when we play, we're playing a stack. right? So we have 100 big blinds. We're playing our 100 big blind stack according to our 100 big blind stack strategy. And then we lose 3/4 of it. Maybe it was our fault. Maybe it wasn't our fault. It's not important. What is important now is that we now have 25 big blinds, and we're now playing a 25 big blind stack according to our 25 big blind stack strategy. And so focusing on the fact that this game, much like chess, is a game where we're going to have a strategy that we want to execute, and that strategy is going to vary based on our stack size. Focusing on that is something that also really helped me because, I'll sit there at 100 big blinds and focus on that strategy, and then I lose that 3/4 of my stack. But instead of saying, oh my God, I just went from 100 to 25 big blinds, I try and take that breath, and I say, okay, now I'm playing 25 big blinds. So that's something that can help as well.
Yeah. If anybody ever sends you a hand, like if one of your poker buddies is like, hey man, I want to talk to you about this hand that I played, and just do kind of a line check with you and make sure that I didn't do anything stupid here. What do you think about this? All right, so here's the situation. This is the level. I have 30 bigs. A villain under the gun. And then they start talking. They don't say, I have 30 bigs. I used to have 120 bigs. But then I lost this huge coin flip, and I tried to hit this flush, and they don't tell you, it doesn't matter. The fact is, you have 30 bigs. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that too. Just the idea that a short stack like 15 bigs is your favorite to play might make it easier if you get, cut down really short at some point in a tournament where you did have a large stack. My favorite stack to play is like 200 plus big blinds, I'll be honest. But I understand, it's harder for those of us who have studied theoretical charts and things to make a big mistake with 10 or 15 bigs, right?
Yeah.
It's much easier for us to make a big mistake with 200 or 300 bigs. So in that sense, it's my favorite too. I do feel less pressure when I'm short stacked in a tournament because I feel like the hands kind of play themselves.
They do, yeah. And let's be clear, I don't want to have 15 big blinds
yeah, I know.
at any point, just for the record. And it's not my favorite stack size to play either. I definitely prefer 100. Yeah. But yeah, playing a short stack is, in a sense, easy. I mean, you shove what you're supposed to shove, and hopefully you get there.
Yeah, and if you have amateurs at your table, they make enormous mistakes against our 15 bigs. I've seen some unbelievable folds. Like just the other day at Venetian, and we're going to do strategy in a minute, so this isn't really strategy, but just a little bit of a story. A player raised from late position, and I had, I think, 13, might have been 12 or 13 bigs, and I shoved from the small blind after he opened from, I believe, the cutoff. And he folds and shows an ace. And I'm like, I can't imagine that his fold is correct.
It assuredly is almost assuredly is not.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a nice segue. I was actually just in Vegas myself. I went out for the first 2 weeks of the online series, so we must have just missed each other. But went out, got an Airbnb with a bunch of friends, similar to Sleevey, who you just had on a couple weeks ago.
Sleevey.
I did get to talk to him a little bit. I played in that Win 500K as well.
What a great guy. I really like him a lot. We're going to have him back on. We got a lot of good feedback about that episode. Simon Levy, if you haven't heard it, people thought he was, he seemed to have his act together for being so young, and I agree.
Yeah, I agree completely. It was a pleasure talking to him over at the Win. But that Vegas trip that I just took, I did see some ridiculous folds. One of which happened in the big event that I ended up final tabling. I made my first big final table of my career, at least live, this summer in Vegas. I final tabled the Venetian 400K. It ended up turning into a prize pool of 1.2 million. And at that tournament, when there were probably 4 or 5 tables left, what happened at one point is a relatively tight player opened under the gun. He had maybe 23 big blinds. Not a very big stack. He got 3-bet to about 7 big blinds from mid position. It folded back to the under the gun player who jammed, and then mid position tanked and folded face up, ace king offsuit.
Wow.
And that just, I just.
You're speechless. I mean, you'll never see that online, basically. You won't see that on too many online sites that I'm familiar with. So, wow, that's incredible.
Forget the fact that he's getting like 5 or 4 to 1 on a call. I mean, it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically an incorrect fold unless you're absolutely certain you're up against pocket aces.
Yeah, if he flips over his hand and it's pocket aces, you can fold. Otherwise, you should probably call.
Yeah. How can you ever be that sure unless you've actually seen the cards? You have an ace. I mean, oh my goodness, wow, that is ridiculous. All right, so seems like the stage is set, and I don't know what kind of hands you brought, but I know that all of us were collectively celebrating the fact that Carlos and not you won the 888 tournament.
Being at that final table was a blessing and a curse, I guess you'd have to say, because I kind of wanted Carlos to win also.
Everybody's favorite. He is everyone's favorite. Tell me one person who doesn't love Carlos. I mean, come on. That's amazing.
For real. What's interesting about that tournament is I was actually playing live that day too. So I played the Venetian 100K. It was a one-day tournament that day, and I was playing this event on my phone. And so I this is the first time I traveled to Vegas for the World Series of Poker. Assuming, knocking here on wood, that all goes off well into the fall without a hitch. I'll be there this fall as well. Quick brag, won a seat into the main event while I was in Vegas, so I'll be back in November.
Hey, that's great. Awesome.
Yeah, it is great. Excuse me, sorry, I was playing live with that tournament, and I never expected, of course, to make the final table of an $800 World Series bracelet event with 700 entries. I mean, I think I'm a good poker player, but not, competing against the best in the world. I never expected to make the final table. So as we got deeper and deeper and deeper into this World Series event, I got deeper and deeper into the Venetian event too that I was playing live, and ended up. So when we hit the final 2 tables of the World Series event, we were at the final 3 tables of the Venetian event.
Wow.
So I'm sitting. Yeah, so I was sitting here on my phone trying to effectively navigate, the final 16 players in this bracelet event while trying to pay attention to the live event going on in front of me.
Now, how hard was that? I mean, how screwed up did that get you?
A lot of people do it, and early in tournaments, it's fine. Even midway through tournaments, it's fine. But let me tell you, as much as everyone will say, oh, it's such a good problem to have, I can just feel myself bleeding money as I can't give either of these tournaments my full attention. I don't have a bracelet, so I'm sitting here playing for my first career bracelet. Meanwhile, the 100K ballooned to like 230K, so that has like a 50K first place prize. So it really was a tough spot for me because I knew I wasn't playing optimally in either one. And what I ended up doing was I ended up not choosing one, which I should have. Is we talked about this. I talked about this with some of my friends, but I think at some point I should have just left the Venetian table, and that point probably should have been when we reached the final table of the bracelet event. I should have left my Venetian table and focused solely on the bracelet event because I did end up making a pretty bad shove that knocked me out in 8th. And part of it was because at the time of the jam, we were changing tables at the Venetian tournament. So we were going from 3 to 2, so I was trying to gather up my chips and my backpack, and meanwhile I have OB case and the small blind facing a button open, and I'm just like, okay,
you want to just shove, and then you can concentrate on like the physical thing you have to do live. So you just shove and then forget it.
Yeah. It in there.
Yeah.
And go to the new table, and he's gonna, it was over a button open, so he's gonna fold, 85% of the time.
Sure, yeah.
So, he ended up having it. For those that didn't see the stream or the hand, it was ace deuce off that I shoved, which is not a good shove. He snap called me with ace queen and flopped a queen, so I was basically drawing dead.
So if I hear you correctly, Joey, what I think you're trying to tell us is that had you not been so unbelievably good at live poker, you would have won the bracelet instead of Carlos.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm just trying to.
No, you're not putting words in my mouth. That is exactly what I'm saying. I'm so unbelievably talented at live poker that I had to let Carlos win the online one. You know?
Yeah, you got to spread, share the wealth. As you're having the best summer you've ever had, throw Carlos a bone too. That's really generous of you. So on behalf of Carlos, thank you for that.
Well, on behalf of World Series of Poker bracelet winner Carlos Wells.
That's right. That's what I'm supposed to say. Exactly. Yeah. All right. So let's hear one of the hands from your final table, if you have one.
Sure. It's not from the final table. I believe it's from the final two tables.
Okay,
though.
That's cool.
And so this is from that bracelet event, the 888. At this point, we're six-handed at our table, I believe. So we're either 13, 12, or 11 left.
Right.
I'd have to imagine we're around 12-ish. I am currently chip leading at my table with 25 big blinds, so I have 1.1 million.
God, these things get so short, don't they? If the chip leader at a table has 25 big blinds and the prize is a bracelet and like $150,000 or something. God.
Yeah, and eighth place is like $9,000.
$20,
so
yeah.
$20, yeah. So I'm chip leading at the table with 1.1 million. The blinds are 20 and 40K.
Okay.
So we have a little shy of 30 actually. So like 26, 27 big blinds.
Yeah, okay.
The rest of the stacks are between 10 and 20 big blinds. Okay. Carlos is 2 to our right. Everyone else is relatively unknown. As I mentioned, I did not give this tournament the attention it deserved.
Right.
Unfortunately.
So you couldn't. Yeah, you're busy. You couldn't go and check everybody on Poker News, Hendon Mob, and Google and try to figure out who everybody is, because you got other things that you're doing, like trying to win a large sum of money in person as well. Now I've experimented with this, playing live while also playing on my device. And I get very distracted. Like I end up timing down on my device or just making a mistake in the live hand. Like I don't think it's for me. And I actually played against Brandon Adams in a live bracelet event while he was in the process of winning his bracelet online 2 summers ago. And I mean I basically stole all the chips from Brandon Adams, because our tournament was in early middle stages and he was playing the final table. So he was sitting there, but he was mostly focusing on his phone, and I was taking all the chips from him. Like if he was in the blind, I didn't care what I had, I just raised it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's the issue. If you're going to do this on your phone, you have to understand this is what you're getting yourself into. And as, a Vegas first-timer, a first-time World Series poker player, wasn't 100% ready to be at, the final two tables of a live 100K while final tabling a World Series bracelet event on my phone.
Yeah, but I mean, in your wildest dreams, you didn't think that was going to happen. So I don't blame you for doing both. But yeah, that is as some people would say, I know what you mean when they say that's a great problem to have. Like they don't want to hear you complain, oh, poor baby, you went really deep in 2 tournaments on the same day, But yeah, I also understand your side of it, is that you would like to have been able to, I guess, compartmentalize or just focus more. Or as you said, perhaps you could have chosen one or the other, but I don't know.
Yeah, I ended up doing mediocre according to where I was at in both.
Yeah.
So it just that's not what we want.
That's not what we want.
And especially at the Venetian, they're historically, I will say, tough on people using their electronic devices at the table.
They are,
as well as they're very uneven about it. So some dealers will not bat an eyelash, whereas other dealers can kind of make it their mission to make sure you don't play on your phone.
Sure.
So it was tough to kind of try and be looking up these people, and figuring out who they were on Hendon Mob or Poker News or that sort of thing. I wasn't even watching the stream or even trying to. So, but yeah. Anyways, go back to the hand. We're chip leading at the table. We have 1.1 million. We're in the big blind, 6-handed, and we have 9-10 of diamonds.
Okay.
As I mentioned, the table is very short, and action folds to the small blind, who is unknown, who completes. And we're here with 9-10 of diamonds in the big blind.
And he has how many chips?
And he has 830,000. So he has about 22 to 23 big blinds. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So he's just got a little less than what we've got. All right. Now, I mean, you could certainly raise if you want. Like, you could probably raise and take it a lot. I mean, this guy can't really mess around with his stack, right? So if you make it 4x, he's probably going to fold like a huge amount of the time. But I think it may actually be more profitable to play such a playable hand in position and just check it and see a flop. You know, if he checks twice and we miss, if we miss the flop and then our opponent checks twice, we can usually bet and take it on the turn no matter what cards are out there, right? So, I don't know. If you told me you raised, I wouldn't be mad at it, but I would just check.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking along the same lines as you are, especially at this point. Chip leader of the table, 13-12 left in this event. There's, 9-10 suited is a hand that flops very well, but there's no reason to try and play this huge pot right now pre-flop with the small blind. The hands that he's gonna fold if we make it like 3 or 4x are hands like that we're probably just gonna fold anyway, and our hands we don't necessarily want to fold. Hands like 4-7 of diamonds is a hand I want him to have here, as well as when you think about how we're gonna construct our raising range here from the big blind versus blind. I think this shallow, we want to make a lot of our raises hands that don't play very well post flop. Hands like King 6 offsuit or Queen 5 off or something like that. And the hands like 9-10 suited or Jack 8 suited, those sorts of hands are hands we're going to want to check behind and see flops with and play in position.
Yeah, so now against an unknown opponent, you don't want to necessarily make assumptions about whether he's going to be exploitable. Like, is he going to limp with his bad hands and raise with his good hands? So when he just calls here, does that mean he has a bad hand? Or is he the kind of fellow who might be capable of completing from the small blind with a monster, hoping that you raise with any 2 cards so that he can end up playing a big pot with you? There's a lot of cat and mouse that goes on, and I just think the hand flops too well and is too playable to raise with. So yeah, I agree with you. I think checking is best.
Yeah, and if we do raise and he ends up jamming over the top, like even if he has aces specifically or kings, like 9-10 suited is not doing that poorly against it, and so we're actually folding away a decent amount of equity. And if he's doing this with hands, like Ace 5 suited or King Queen suited, we're folding away way too much equity. So raising and having to fold to a jam is really bad in my opinion. So it's another argument for just checking behind.
Yeah, and you will be folding. So raising allows you to be more exploitable. And with an unknown opponent, you just don't want to put yourself in that position where he has a play that is going to make, I mean, he'd be printing money. Limping,
exactly,
and then shoving with any 2 cards, because you're always going to fold the 10-9. So you need to make sure that much of your raising range is going to be value, and then, like you say, maybe like some of your King 6, some of your Queen 5, but not your 10-9 suited. We should see a flop with this hand.
Yeah, and this is not really a spot where we can apply that much ICM pressure either, because, like I said, the other stacks at the table are all kind of so smushed together, and everyone's so short that he's going to be willing to take as many chances as he would normally anyway.
Yeah.
I should say he or she, but...
Yeah, we should. I always say he, and it's very sexist of me, especially online. There are more women playing online than there are live.
Yep.
That's proven, because women are more comfortable in the computers where they don't have to smell us and hear our ridiculous comments
Yes, that's very true.
They can play online. It's a lot more comfortable. So yeah, your opponent, gender notwithstanding, would have a great exploit of you if you're going to raise too much just because your opponent limps in. So for all the reasons we said, I think checking is best, and I'm glad that's what you did.
I did check behind, and we go to a flop with 110,000 in the middle. The flop is King of Spades, 9 of Spades, 4 of Hearts. So we flop middle pair with a backdoor straight draw, but not much else.
Okay, and we have the 10-9 of diamonds, so it's middle
we have
pair.
10-9 of diamonds.
Middle pair with the 10 kicker, and then, yeah, I mean, you could catch 2 runners to make a straight, potentially. All right,
Correct.
So I'm assuming that Villain is about to check here.
Villain does not check.
Oh.
Villain bets essentially a minimum bet 43,350,
Okay.
and the blinds are 20 and 40, so it's a min bet.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be no problem. I think we are always calling here 100%. I think raising is I mean, I guess there's an argument for raising, but I don't like it. And we're never folding middle pair blind versus blind.
Yeah, again, if we raise similar to pre-flop, we open ourselves up to so much just headache. Like, what happens if your raise gets raised? Then you're going to be folding what's probably the best hand a lot.
Mm-hmm. Especially because some of the hands that are going to jam or 3-bet jam on the flop over our raise are going to be hands like big draws.
Yeah, there's a lot of draws. Yeah. So just call.
We did just call the bet, and we go to the turn with 196,000 in the middle, so approximately 200K. And the turn is the 10 of clubs. So now the board is King of Spades, 9 of Spades, 4 of Hearts, 10 of clubs, and Hero is in the big blind with 9-10 of diamonds. So we turn 2 pair.
Yeah,
and
no.
Villain checks.
Yeah, now blind versus blind, even top pair is basically a monster. So 2 pairs is a really big hand, unless this board somehow gets incredibly ugly, like the Jack of clubs. No, Jack of Spades, whatever the suit is that's out there, right? Then I'm going to be pretty comfortable with my 2 pair all the way. That said, how much value can we get? If a lot of his leading range is draws, then he might be checking, planning to call here with a draw, unless we bet too much.
Yeah, I think what you'll find nowadays, at least online from my experience, is in the blind versus blind limped pot scenarios, you have the small blind leading for about 1 big blind a decent amount. A lot of people are doing it. I'm doing it myself as well. There's a lot of benefits for it. They're doing it on, pretty much any flop that they want. Most people respond very badly to a small bet on the flop. And so it can be kind of tough to range that, because when you see that min bet come from the small blind, it could be everything from, king queen suited to, 5-8 offsuit. I mean, it could be everything from top pair to 8 high. So there's definitely some hands he's going to be doing this with, such as draws, but I could also see him doing this with certain made hands as well. The tendency of people to play a little bit nittier, deeper in tournaments is often overlooked. And I think at this point, he may even have hands as strong as, king queen or king jack that he limped in, maybe even planning to jam if we raised, ended up hitting top pair, and now wants to kind of do his best to keep the pot as small as possible.
He could have pocket aces for that matter. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, he could.
If he thinks that you're the type, or just hopes that you're the type that likes to raise just because somebody limps in from the small blind, he could be uncapped basically.
Yeah, and you're seeing that more and more nowadays, is that limp shove from the small blind. I think that's really starting to gain some steam, and a lot of the better players are starting to understand which hands they want to do it with too. So something to watch out for
I'm
sure.
doing it quite a bit myself. Because, I mean, anyone who has a HUD on me can see that my aggression factors are on the high end, to say the least. So when I don't come in for a raise, they think I must really have nothing.
Yeah, and it's really nice to do with a hand like a king queen suited or like a king jack suited, because even if the big blind checks behind, your hand still plays fine like post flop, and if the big blind decides to raise, you're doing fine against that range. And even with a hand like king queen suited or king jack suited, you do block some of their calls like ace king or ace queen or ace jack. So it's a really nice hand to limp shove. Those sorts of hands are at 20 big blinds, I'd say.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're on the turn here. Villain has checked to us. There's about 200K in the middle. We turn two pair.
With that in mind, then why don't we just be optimistic here? Maybe he did limp in with pocket aces. Maybe he does have a really strong top pair hand like a king queen or whatever. With that in mind, especially king queen would be great because he also has a gut shot to go with his top pair, right? So yep. I would bet big here. Let's go heavy. Let's bet like 150. You said the pot's like 200.
Yeah, and this is my biggest mistake of the hand, is I check behind. Yeah, it's not a good check, and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
Yeah, but you were also running deep in a live event, so let's not.
Yeah, but I can't just do whatever I want and then say, oh, well, Venetian.
I'm going to keep making that excuse for you if you want. I got you. Don't worry. No, I mean, of course, in the heat of battle, it's different.
It's tough. I think it definitely is a mistake, but my reasoning at the time is that, I have a lot of 9x and 4x in my range here. He min bet the flop and I called. This is a card that I am often going to be checking, and I need to have hands that can call river bets when I do. And I just don't think, like, if I had a hand like, 4 or 5 here is not a hand where I can expect any river to come out and be reasonably comfortable calling any bet at all, a hand like that. So, excuse me. So I checked back, and I think I was doing so to try and protect my check back range, but this is not a hand I think I want to do that with because it's just a little bit too vulnerable, and there are plenty of pair plus gut shots or pair plus flush draws or open-ended straight draws that can give us action.
Yeah, and you just gave all of them a free card. So, no, I'm not going to beat you up. You already said that you don't like your play here, but your rationale is worth considering because we do want to have bluff catchers after we call the flop and check back on the turn. We need to have some bluff catchers in our range. For me, I would let those be other nines. I would probably always, if I check the turn with a 9, I'm always calling pretty much every river bet unless it's like, I don't know, maybe I would fold to a pot size river bet or something if I thought my opponent couldn't make that with worse than just a pair of 9s. Something like that. But I mean, when you check back on the turn, you do invite your opponent to bet the river, and you want to be able to have some calls in there. But I just think 10-9 is too strong to turn into just a bluff catcher here. So that's why I really want to bet it and try to get some value, like especially if he does have spades or a pair and a flush draw. Obviously, a king can't go anywhere. I don't care. Even if you overbet the turn, a king can't really fold. Not heads up, blind versus blind. No way. Because you can have a lot of draws too. So a king just has to hang on. So we're in a spot to get a lot of value, and I think that just protecting your check back range is not a good enough reason not to go for that value here. So I think we agree now. Yeah. But in game you played it this way. So let's see what happens on the river.
No, I definitely you're on point 100%, and this was a huge mistake in this hand that may have ended up costing me a good part of this tournament. It's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this hand is because, kind of just to show that, like, we all make mistakes, right? It happens, even deep in events, and we just, take a deep breath and move on. Anyway, I check behind, and we go to the river, kind of get billed out on the river, which is the 9 of clubs.
No, you want to
So
think
the final board is King of Spades, 9 of Spades, 4 of Hearts, 10 of Clubs, 9 of Clubs, and Hero has 9, 10 of Diamonds, so we went runner for a full house, and villain checks a second time.
Yeah. I mean,
and this becomes a mandatory bet, obviously.
Yeah, of course we're not going to knit it up and check back a full house. But, there's two ways to approach this, and they both make sense. On a theoretical level, we should overbet this river because we expect to get called by the hands that our opponents slow played, like King, Queen, Ace, King, Pocket Aces. Those hands they have to call, or else our opponent has no bluff catchers in his range. They have to call at least some of the time. So overbetting is what I think. I didn't even see this hand before we talked, but I imagine a solver would love to overbet this at least some of the time. A GTO bot would probably say like a big value bet here is the way to go. But in tournaments, it's also extremely important to accumulate chips wherever you can, even if it means sacrificing a little EV. Like, in other words, if he's going to call the overbet 10% of the time, but he'll call a 1/3 of the pot bet 75% of the time, you have to make the smaller bet. So we don't actually know in practice where that line of demarcation is, what exact amount we should bet, how often. But the only thing I wouldn't like is a medium-sized bet. I think we either want to try to squeeze a little more juice out of the orange and get looked up by some kind of questionable hand, like bottom pair or something, or we want to be more optimistic and hope that he's slow playing a big hand, and then we can overbet big, like, I don't know, 280 or something. Because there's still only 200 in this pot. Like, we're not going to go all in.
Yeah, and this really illustrates, despite hitting gin on the river, even if the river didn't give me a full house, there's a decent chance it would have been good enough for me to value bet, and this illustrates why we want to bet the turn. Now that the pot is only 200K, the pot could be, 400K right now or more, but it's not. One thing I tried to do in this spot was really think about what kind of range villain has. I mean, he limped in pre-flop, he min-bet the flop, and then checked turn and checked river. I could see it being done, with a king a decent amount of the time, but this range is very medium strength-ish. In my opinion, it's going to be hands that decided not to continue bluffing on the turn for whatever reason, if they were bluffing, and decided to play pot control and bluff catch on the turn if they were value based. So if he had the king queen or he had the king jack, he decided to check that on the turn, check that on the river, and play bluff catching with it. Meanwhile, if he had a bluff, he elected not to bluff the turn. Hands that aren't going to bluff the turn, and as a reminder, the turn was a 10, so the flop was king 9-4 and the turn was a 10, so that makes me think hands like 10 jack or 10 queen, right? Hands that were bluffing flop that turned a little bit of equity. Now we do block those hands pretty hard with our 10 itself, but at that point my rationale was that villain's range is relatively weak, and I wanted to make my bet look as bluffy as possible. In retrospect, I love the overbet. I think it's much better, especially when we see results, although we can't be results oriented. I bet about, what's this going to be, 65% pot. I bet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into the 196,000 chip pot.
Yeah, that's the bet I didn't want to make, is like somewhere in between an overbet and an underbet. Yeah, that's the sizing I wouldn't want to use here, because you can't really get called by a very weak but showdownable hand like, I don't know, bottom pair or some little weak pair. And you will get called by stronger hands that would also have called the bigger bet. So yeah, that's the sizing I didn't want to use.
Exactly. It's kind of like the worst of all the sizings, I guess you have to say. But yeah, so I bet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into the pot, and Villain snap called with Ace King offsuit.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping he had. So yeah, we missed out on a ton of value here for sure. But did we mention that you were also really deep in a live event at the Venetian at the same time?
I think we mentioned that my live poker skills were so incredibly good that I had to let Carlos win this one, so I ended up making all these mistakes for him, right? So.
Well, everyone loves Carlos, and it's funny to me. Like, I'll listen to Thinking Poker podcast, and they'll say, like, when they have Carlos on, Andrew will come on. Now, I've been a guest on that show 5 times. And he'll say, "Oh, it's a pleasure to welcome back our favorite guest, everybody's favorite guest." And it's not even close. None of the other guests are anywhere near as good as this one. And the way they introduce Carlos is just like, honestly, it hurts a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he's earned it. He's earned it.
He's the guy. He's the guy. Every single person in poker loves him. So on behalf of the entire poker community, thank you for not getting full value for your full house. With 10-9, allowing Carlos to cross the finish line.
Yeah, I did go up to 1.3 million after this hand and was chip leading, and then I said, "Okay, Carlos, go ahead."
Here you go. I proved that I could take the chip lead with 12 players left in a bracelet event. What else do I need to prove? You're the one who cares about the jewelry. Go ahead, Carlos. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just so cool seeing him win. I mean, I've never felt so happy to have not won a tournament. I mean, obviously I wanted to get it with him, but like it was so cool.
And what place did you end up getting, Joey?
I ended up finishing in 8th place, so it was an 8 max. So I busted the final table first. It was so short. I mean, most of us had in between 10 and 20 big blinds. So
yeah, and like we said earlier, there's no huge mistake that anyone who's studied is going to make with those stack sizes. I mean, even if you're trying to ICMIze and figure out whether it's time to ladder or time to push the issue or whatever, just with that stack, it's very hard to really donk it off. I mean, I've seen people do it, but yeah, I doubt that you did that. It just probably got into a coin flip that didn't go your way or something.
These things happen, This is what we signed up for. I have to tell myself this constantly. This is what I signed up for,
It's the truth.
And it was unfortunate. I busted that World Series event and I busted the Venetian event at nearly identical times. So I'd say within about 2 minutes of each other.
Wow. So congratulations. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool though. I mean, especially for your first trip to Vegas during the World Series of Poker. And this year you actually get to do 2 of those because there was one online and now there's going to be a whole other live one, God willing, in October that I'm looking forward to playing. Do you have a certain amount, percentage of your bankroll set aside for that? Are you going to come out here with a game plan? Are you looking for backers? Like, what's your deal with the series this year?
So I'm actually part of a stable. I joined earlier this year, so I don't take any outside backing myself. And basically I play according to the terms of our agreement. So my plan is to go experience whatever I can. I have a couple things I have to plan for in October that are going to be taking up some of my time, so I'm not 100% sure exactly when I'll be in Vegas this fall. I mentioned I did win a seat to the main, so obviously I'll be there in early November. But I'd really like to make it to some of the other events as well, including a couple of the PL08 events, because I'm I really like playing PL08, and you can't find it live anywhere, So.
No, you can never find that game live. Now, before I let you go, Joey, I have to ask you, I'm sure that a lot of our listeners would be really interested in a little bit more. Obviously, I don't want to ask you to share anything you're not comfortable sharing, but as far as what it's like to be in a stable, what can you tell our listeners about that experience, how it works, how you end up in a stable, what the deal is, Anything you're comfortable sharing about that arrangement that you have, because I'm sure that many of our listeners are like, oh, I'd like to have a backer put me in his stable too.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. As far as getting involved in a stable goes, it's really just about networking. It's no different than coming out of school with a degree and trying to get a job. It's about talking to people. It's about immersing yourself in the poker world. I've been around, poker Twitter, poker Twitch, poker Discord for quite a while. Tried to make those connections, and it ended up being some of those connections that led me into the stable. So it really was just kind of me going out on my own and making these friends, making these connections, and that's what led me into the stable. As far as being involved in it, it's, I don't want to talk it up too much because people already really, really want to get involved in them, but it's an amazing experience. Having all of these people around me available to me 24/7. I can post hands in our Discord. I can talk to, my coaches or my friends or other people in the stable. I can say, hey, what do you think of this play or that play? It's no coincidence that I joined the stable and I'm having my career year right now. I have coaching sessions, every week or every other week. I'm really big personally on studying. A lot of poker players say they study, but they don't really study. And I'm someone who is a big believer that you don't put in the time in the lab and you're not going to win on the felt. So I try and keep a strict every 3 hours of play, I spend 1 hour studying rule. I don't always get there, but I try really hard to do that.
That's a good rule. That is a really good rule. If we all did that, man, how much better would our results be if everybody did that? Wow, that's a great rule.
That's what I do, and I also don't play every day. I play 3 to 4 days a week. So the days that I don't play are the days I study, and there are also days I do something else. We can get so involved in poker. Like, I live in Southern California. It's July. It's beautiful, so I'll spend my off days going to play frisbee golf or going to the park or taking a walk with my wife or something like that, but not playing every day and making sure I study proportionally to how much I play are definitely two things that have helped this year for me too.
Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing your your insights on that. Is there anything else you would be willing to tell us about how it works exactly? Like, for example, I can picture some of our listeners hearing this. Like, well, does your backer give you an unlimited amount of money? Do you pay and then the backer pays you back? Does he keep half the winnings? Like, as much detail as you're willing to give, because I think there are a lot of different kinds of deals out there, and I think that people might be curious if it's not too personal.
No, not at all. Much like literally everything else in poker, it depends. Every stable deal is different. For me, the way it works is at the beginning, I was given a very basic plan where I was told I was allowed to play up to a certain buy-in level on this site or that site. The stable operates across all of the U.S. sites, both quote-unquote the legalized and the quote-unquote unregulated sites as well. So everyone in the stable plays on 5, 6, 7 different websites. So at the beginning, they said, okay, on this website you can play up to this level tournament, and on this website you can play up to that level tournament, because certain websites are notoriously softer than others. And as I started to have success at the beginning, they kind of started pushing those boundaries and saying, okay, now you can play up to $55 tournaments, and then now you can play up to 109s, now you can play up to the 215s, etc. So as you start improving and showing to the people in the stable that you're really dedicated to learning and improving, if you're having the success, they start bumping you up. And I think I've talked with other friends of mine who are in different stables, and it's becoming increasingly clear that we have it pretty good in terms of the freedom we have. So they really trust us, and they trust us to make good decisions with our money. So they don't micromanage. They don't say, why did you fire 5 bullets into the 109 warm-up? You know, they don't say, why did you go play this $800 live tournament? If you think you're a favorite in the field, you can, tell them, hey, I think I'm a favorite in this field, and they've never said no to me. So they really trust us. They give us a lot of freedom, and of course, profits are split. So as someone who doesn't, put up the funds to play with, I obviously don't get to keep all the profits. So that's kind of how the general agreement works. In other stables, there's a lot more structure, and the one that I'm in specifically, like I said, they do give us a lot of freedom, which has just been absolutely amazing. But yeah.
That's great. It sounds like a great deal, and thanks for the download. I think that a lot of people would be very, very curious about that, and maybe even have like an aspiration to one day join a stable themselves. So, kind of hearing your thoughts on it. I imagine that one stable is probably very much unlike another. Like, one thing I don't think I would like is if I sort of had a boss and I had to explain what I did and why I did it and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the month, I'm showing a profit, so that should be good enough. I don't want to have to justify why I put in another bullet or whatever, but it sounds like you don't have somebody micromanaging you or second guessing you or putting ice in your wounds. It already sucks to bust out of a poker tournament. I don't want to have to answer a bunch of questions either. But I guess you wouldn't be in the stable if they didn't think that you could. You wouldn't be in the stable if they didn't think that you could handle the ups and downs of being a pro.
Right. And there was an extensive interview process before I joined, so it wasn't just like, oh, hey, sure, come on in. It was a couple weeks of back and forth.
You said all I have to do is join Twitter.
But yeah, also if anyone is curious about it, they can feel free to message me on Twitter. My DMs are open. I'd be happy to discuss it with you guys if you have any more questions about what it's like or that sort of thing.
That is so generous. You guys take him up on that, okay? Go on Twitter at Joe_Beagles, BEAGLES, and ask him any questions that you might have about that. That is not something we have talked about very much on the podcast, so just as much as hearing your story and how you basically gave a bracelet to our friend Carlos, hearing about your stable is also, I think, very valuable to our listenership. So thank you so much for being open about that and about everything, and for being such a great first-time guest.
Of course, Clayton. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, so thanks for coming on. We'd be glad to have you again in the future. So for Joe Beagles, and for everyone here at Tournament Poker Edge, I'm Clayton Fletcher. Thank you so much for listening.
I wanna hold them like they do in Texas plays. Fold them, let them hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Log in intuition, play the cards with babes to start. And after she's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on her heart. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'll get her heart, show her what I got. Can't read mine, no, she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Can't read mine, no, she can't read a mile. Poker face, she's got to love nobody. Poker face, poker face. Poker face, poker face. I wanna roll with her, hard pay we will be. While little gambling is fun when you're with me. I love it. Russian roulette is not the same without a gun. And baby, when it's love, it's not rough, it